Let's pick things up there for tonight. State Line Defense. Joining me, retired Army Colonel Douglas Macgregor. He's a decorated combat veteran, author, PhD, and Executive Vice President of the Burke-McGregor Group. Doug, this is shaping up to be a huge week for defense. We have a lot of ground to cover. First, the budget. You followed these negotiations on Capitol Hill for months. How will the current proposal impact DOD?
Keep in mind that this budget has a lot of pork associated with the election year in it.
What a surprise.
So, as a result, you've got both Democrats and large numbers of Republicans who want to pass it for reasons that don't have a lot to do with immediate defense needs, but have a lot to do with transfers of cash to districts and states, assembly lines and factories and so forth. So that's ultimately what's behind the budget deal. And it's a temporary fix because there's no way to pay for some of the savings that they're supposedly going to extract down the line. So we're not necessarily solving the larger budget problem.
Nothing changes. Every year it's the same conversation we have.
That's right.
What role does the long-range strike bomber play in this discussion?
You know, that's a good question, and there are a lot of people who are beginning to wonder why now. One of the reasons we're looking at this is that the long-range strike bomber is an idea that's at least 20 years old. And when it was first conceived of, we saw it as a penetrator that could penetrate any integrated air defenses and deliver either conventional or nuclear munitions. Today, we live in a different world. First of all, the business of stealth and structuring aircraft to avoid radar is increasingly delusional. You can't loiter over the enemy's territory, which is what this bomber is supposed to do without being shot down. And we can turn to alternate means of delivering these things. Unmanned aircraft that can fly closer, may even penetrate, but could be lost at lower expense, but in the meantime can launch the missiles. There are people on the Hill asking these questions, but let's face it, we've already got enormous cost overruns with the F-35. People have been burned badly on that aircraft.
The plane that ate the Pentagon.
Yeah, so what makes us think that this will be any different? They've already admitted that the initial assessments, which were about $35 billion for the strike bomber, were off. The new assessment is at least $58 billion. So there are lots of people who are going to put up some resistance, but probably not as much as we would like, Morris.
All right, we've talked money. Let's focus on strategic priorities. First, ISIS. Defense Secretary Ash Carter testified today that there may be more U.S. action on the ground in Iraq and Syria. In addition,
and from the skies above, we expect to intensify our air campaign, including with additional U.S. and coalition aircraft, to target ISIL with a higher and heavier rate of strikes.
Now, Doug, Senator Lindsey Graham called it a, quote, half-assed strategy. Is it?
Well, there's never been a strategy. On the one hand, we want to somehow or another remove Mr. Assad from power, even though people like Trump and others have pointed to the stupidity of such action. In the meantime, Russia is now committed to keeping him in power, so the notion of removing him seems to be stupid and unattainable. Secondly, for some reason, we want to defend Baghdad, which is a satellite of Iran and is increasingly interested in close ties with Russia. I haven't figured out what that's about. And then finally, we don't like ISIS. ISIS is reprehensible, but ISIS is part of the war against Iran, which is why Turkey won't really support us and will not engage in direct strikes on ISIS. It's also why the Saudis and the other peninsular Arabs are singularly unenthusiastic about fighting ISIS. So the real question is, why are we doing this? How does this help us? How does this improve the situation in the region?
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Russia continues to play a central role in Syria's civil war. They ramped up airstrikes weeks ago. Are we bombing different targets or simply bombing Syria into oblivion?
No, we're bombing different targets. There's no question about that. We obviously operate under much more restrictive rules of engagement. The Russians take the position privately that if you are near the enemy, in other words, the various Sunni Islamist groups, some of whom we consider to be moderate, then you're supporting them, and therefore you deserve the worst. We've always tried very, very hard to exclude civilians. That's one of the reasons our bombing campaigns, no matter how intense we want to make them, don't work very well. So we don't have a good answer. Syria is not going away as far as Mr. Assad is concerned. The Russians are making some headway against his opponents.
Here's something else that I find alarming. The New York Times reports Russian submarines and spy ships are also making some aggressive moves near vital undersea internet cables. Ours. Why is this important, Doug?
Well, there are several things working here that we should keep in mind. First and foremost is that Mr. Putin recognizes that the future of sea power resides with submarines. Increasingly, most of the world has figured that out. And so he's putting his marginal dollar into submarines and unmanned submersibles. His subs now are being designed not simply to attack with kinetic weapons foreign vessels or us or anyone else. They're also being employed as intelligence platforms, something that we've done for many, many decades. The global information network depends on those cables. The Russian submarines are capable of plugging into them and monitoring what goes back and forth. That's really the greatest danger. It's not really in Russia's interest at this point to destroy those.
Japan is also making submarine warfare a high priority, Doug. That could impact their ability to form a modern Marine Corps. Explain.
Well, Japan has never had a quote, Marine Corps, unquote, and they've decided they're not going to form one. What they've done is identify one brigade of about 4,000 troops inside the Army that will be employed for amphibious purposes if needed. But the Japanese have come to the conclusion that an attack from the sea against a defended coastal position is suicidal. It can't be done. Secondly, the Japanese have decided they don't want to invade China. So China is off the table for that purpose. Therefore, why would you want to conduct an amphibious assault against the Chinese coast? And finally, they've recognized, again, submarines are king. The submarine is an intelligence platform, an attack platform. It's used for sea control. It prevents your shipping from being destroyed in a war. It is the ultimate weapon of war at sea.
Telling it like it is, Colonel Douglas Macgregor, Executive Vice President of the Burke Macgregor Group. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you.